Good evening and welcome to the Late Debate. In 13 weeks' time, Londoners go to the polls to elect a new mayor, and for the first time, the winner won't be called Ken or Boris. The two frontrunners to take over at City Hall are both MPs from south of the river, Conservative Zac Goldsmith and Labour's Sadiq-Khan. But before I speak to them, let's put the contest into context. Sadiq-Khan's surprise victory in the Labour selection contest in September saw him defeat Tessa Jowell, the popular former Olympics minister.
I'm overwhelmed. I'm deeply humbled.
The winning candidate is widely thought to have overtaken the front-runner on a wave of Corbyn mania.
Boris Johnson defied political gravity by beating Ken Livingstone twice.
Zac Goldsmith was chosen by the Tories at the beginning of October, just in time to introduce himself to party members at the annual conference. David Cameron was there to show his support. In fact, the Prime Minister has been a familiar figure alongside the Tories' new man, on a building site in Barkingside at the beginning of the year, and more recently at a rally in Mill Hill, where he issued this memorable warning.
You do not want to be lab rats in the first Corbyn economics experiment in public life in our country. So we've got to win this. That's the alternative.
Sadiq-Khan was a close ally of the former Labour leader Ed Miliband. He was in Labour's shadow cabinet hoping for a job in government. He was endorsed in his campaign to be the party's mayoral candidate by a former City Hall tenant, Ken Livingstone. But there's been a noticeable lack of photo calls with Labour's new leader. When he spoke at the party's conference in Brighton, Jeremy Corbyn was nowhere to be seen. In fact, Sadiq-Khan is now more likely to be spotted in the company of Zac Goldsmith, as the two rivals embark on a marathon of mayoral hustings, along with the candidates from the other main parties. Let's cut to the chase. Sadiq, in 60 seconds, tell me why you should be the next mayor of London.
Well, London's the greatest city in the world, but we're at a crossroads. Londoners are being priced out of this city because of the housing crisis and the cost of commuting. Londoners today haven't got the opportunities this great city gave me. I've got the experience to deliver. I've helped run a successful business and served as a transport minister. I've got the vision to build a city that serves all Londoners, to fix the housing crisis so there are more genuinely affordable homes to buy and rent, to build a modern and affordable transport system, to support businesses so they can grow and more Londoners can earn a London living wage, and there are more good quality apprenticeships like my brother had. London's at a crossroads. I think I've got the experience, the values and the vision to put us back on the right path.
OK, Sadiq, thank you. Zac, your turn.
So London is back on the map as the world's most important city, but there are far too many Londoners who've been priced out of their own city. So I'm standing for mayor to protect that success story, but to make it work for all Londoners. My action plan for London will deliver more homes, better transport, safer streets, cleaner environment. And my record shows that when I make a promise, I deliver. That's why just a few months ago at the general election, the people who know me best, my constituents, rewarded me with the biggest increased majority of any incumbent MP in the country. As a mayoral candidate, I've stood against union bosses holding London to ransom. I stood against cuts to the police force. Now, there are three things that we need to know about Sadiq-Khan. He nominated Jeremy Corbyn. He would do it again, as he said so many times, and he has no record at all of working with this government. If he were to win in May, we'd have 4 years of gridlock. We'd have 4 years of London being effectively used as a giant Corbyn experiment, and we'd have a £2 billion black hole in London's budget. London is the greatest city on earth, and the world is watching Zac, this election.
You're talking there about Sadiq.
Yeah.
I asked you to talk about your ideas.
Yeah.
Now, you've both made housing a priority. Clearly, no candidate will disagree with that. But what is it about your housing plan that's better than his?
Well, I'll make the point that none of the candidates are going to disagree that we need more housing, safer streets, better. The key issue is who can deliver. Now, you talk about housing. We have a real housing crisis in London today. We've reached a point today.
But what are you going to do?
I'll tell you, we've reached a point today where the average Londoner, on an average salary, even on double the average salary, cannot afford to get the keys to their own home. So we need to double the number of homes being built. And I've pledged to build 50,000 homes a year. The question is, how do you do that? And the main obstacle is land. So the challenge is to free up land. You do that by doing a deal with government, prizing away the vast tracts of publicly owned brownfield land that the government controls, and you do it by growing the transport infrastructure. That is the only way to make that land accessible. And that means protecting the TfL budget, not taking £2 billion out of it. That's how you get 50,000 homes a year.
If that's your housing plan, what can you disagree about that?
What Zac said is very interesting, and I'd agree with a lot of what he's said about the housing crisis in London. Look, what London needs is a mayor who's London's champion and is a fighter for London, not who's the government's representative to
But you've got
London.
to work with the government.
Well, let me explain what I do, Simon. I would set up in City Hall a team called Homes for Londoners. What we would make sure happened in London was a London plan where developers, local authorities know my expectations as the mayor of this city is half of all new homes are genuinely affordable. And let me explain what I mean by genuinely affordable, because here there's a difference between Zac Goldsmith and myself. Well, it's very important. And so what I mean by genuinely affordable is a combination of either homes where you pay a social rent, and there's a formula linked to manual workers, roughly speaking, £105 a week, and or homes where you pay a London living rent, which is a third of average local earnings. So if in Camden the average earnings was £1,500, the living rent would be £500, and shared ownership homes to buy with a deposit of £5,200. Compare my examples of what a genuinely affordable home is with Zac's.
And you say here's a what?
Well, Zac can speak for himself, but Zac's definition of an affordable home in London is homes costing £450,000.
So you put a price on it.
That's not true. That's not only not true, it is the opposite of the truth.
Well,
and I think we can expect a little bit of honesty in this campaign. That's a nonsense point to make.
Let me explain.
You haven't put a price on how much you think an affordable home is. You've talked about rents, but as for sale, what price is an affordable home?
Well, it depends what part of London they're in. So let me give you an example. So in zones 3 to 6, which is the area where TfL will be releasing land over the next few months and years, we can build shared ownership homes where the annual rent you'll be paying is £400 less than it's now. So it'll be £400 a month rent. What Shelter calculates
You're still not putting a price on the value of the property.
It's a third of your disposable income. And so if the disposable income in the household is £40,000, the mortgage you'll be paying plus the rent will be a third of that. That's my definition, I follow the experts on that, of what affordable home is. And it's for Zac to explain how he thinks a house costing £500,000 is affordable to the typical Londoner.
Yeah, I hope you'll give me a chance to come back and look. But sadiq-khan is what he's just said is not only wrong, it's the opposite of the truth. I've made the point many times that £450,000 is not affordable, particularly to people on average incomes. It's a pure fabrication. What Sadiq-khan is talking about is starter homes, a really valuable initiative that's helped tens of thousands of people onto the housing ladder, people who otherwise would not be able to do so. £450,000 is the legal cap. Now, I've been visiting schemes in London where starter homes are being sold for around £160,000.
Where is that?
Ealing, £160,000.
So you could buy a 3-bedroom home for
£160,000. I said a starter home. I didn't say a 3-bedroom home. There are £160,000 in Ealing. There are £250,000 starter homes, 2-bedroom in Camden. The point is that if you want an appropriate housing policy for London, it has to cater to people across the income spectrum. If you are earning the average income in London, you're never going to qualify for social housing. Nor can you buy a home on the market.
Let me respond to Zac's point. I mean, he's spoken for, So both the examples Zac has given are two excellent Labour councils, Ealing and Camden, and I've also visited those sites. And what they both say is they're currently working with their hands tied behind their back because they've got a government who doesn't believe in building affordable homes and a mayor who thinks an affordable home is 80% of market value. Imagine what Ealing and Camden could do with a Labour mayor on their side, with a London plan saying to developers half of all new homes need to be genuinely affordable, but also fixing the rental market with a not-for-profit letting agent covering all of London. And I've spoken to most councils and they all say this mayor's been a disaster and a mini Boris won't solve the problems.
Can I just ask you about the issue of affordable homes and the land that you're going to put them on? You're talking about TfL land, but you're also talking about TfL land being available for solar farms and renewable energy. I mean, is there enough TfL land to build all these affordable homes you want? And why hasn't Boris done it already?
So if you think about Hyde Park, TfL owns land equivalent to 16 times Hyde Park. Not all of this can have homes built on it, but a lot of it can. We estimate that we could build very, very quickly 10,000 homes on land released in zones 3 to 6.
So we asked how many homes are you going to build?
We need 50,000 homes a year. A very large chunk of that will happen on publicly owned land, not just TfL land, but GLA land. There is still some GLA land left to. But also, we need to negotiate with the government to free up publicly owned land owned by the Ministry of Defence, the Ministry of Justice, the National Health Service. We need to work with local authorities. Some local authorities own almost half of the land within their boundaries.
You both want to give Londoners a chance to get at the top of the head of the queue to buy homes. How do you do that? That's bucking the market.
It is essential that if you're building homes on publicly owned land, that you make those homes available to Londoners. That's the commitment that I've made, and it's absolutely essential. It's not a revolutionary idea, incidentally. The schemes that we've just been arguing about. I agree with Zac. The schemes we've just been arguing. Let me just finish what I'm saying. The schemes that we've just been talking about, arguing about even, are schemes where the houses built can only go to Londoners, people who've been or worked in London for the last 3 years. It is within the power of the Mayor to write within the London plan the rules that we're talking about now, and it's absolutely essential that we do. There's no point building large numbers of homes on publicly owned land if they're then bought by outside investors and left empty.
I welcome Zac's conversion. Can you then explain how Boris Johnson has allowed TfL land in Earl's Court to have only 11% affordable homes and 0 social rent? And those affordable homes cost 80% of market value. Your mentor, your role model has allowed this to happen, and it's a scandal.
Can I just talk about Boris?
Zac,
let me just make a point about Boris.
Before we move on, I want to. You're both very good at telling us what you want to do, but let's also listen to what Londoners want from their new mayor. We've carried out something of a bit of market research.
I think someone who's, for want of a word, probably a little bit more serious about the role, because I think Boris's charisma and character gets him through.
Affordable property. So yes, it's somewhere where I could actually, but I'm 47, I don't own, I can't get on the ladder, it's impossible, really difficult, we're desperate.
The rents are ridiculous for young people. I think it's about time something was done about it. I think we're all human beings and we need to live in a home, so I think we need to have a rent cap.
This so-called cycle highway is causing an absolute chaos, and I think there's deliberate plans just to try and force cars off the road. I don't own a car, but it's just a mess.
Keep the foreigners out, am I allowed to say that? Yeah, because our kids have got no schools or jobs or houses or anything.
I think they should clean up the streets, like make it more clean. As you can see, there's loads of rubbish all over the floor. I think there should be more fines for throwing rubbish.
We heard a couple of Londoners there talk about transport. That's always a big one for the Mayor. Yeah. You're making no offer to help Londoners cut their cost of commuting.
Look, I'm in 13 weeks hoping that Londoners will back me for Mayor. There's nothing I'd like more than to offer them a reduced cost of travel. It's a major part of people's daily expense. But I also know that we have to continue to grow the transport infrastructure. If we don't grow the transport infrastructure, we don't keep London moving. But equally, we don't solve the housing crisis. That is the only way we free up the land we're going to need to solve.
You don't even like the idea of the hopper ticket, which Sadiq and Lib Dems have put forward.
I know that if I were to promise what Sadiq-khan has promised, I know that it would simply not be true. I know that it would be a promise that cannot be delivered. There is no one who is remotely interested in transport who believes that it is possible to take £2 billion out of the transport infrastructure and continue to grow the transport network. And if we don't grow the transport network, London grinds to a standstill and we don't solve the housing crisis. I know that if Sadiq-khan is elected and does keep that promise, it would be catastrophic for London.
It is possible to take £2 billion out because the Mayor has the power to do it. Do you agree with Transport for London with those figures of 1.9 billion? That is the cost of you freezing fares.
No, I don't. Well, let me give you an example of one person who agrees with me. One of the world's leading experts on London, Professor Tony Travers, agrees with me.
It's not true. You're making this up.
And so let me explain how I'll freeze the fares over the 4 years. It's a fully funded package. Boris Johnson has increased the fares every year for the last 8 years, and Londoners have suffered. We pay the most expensive fares on our tubes than any other city in Europe. It's double over the last 8 years. The Mayor's increase this year costs £43 million. Over 4 years, it costs, roughly speaking, £400 million. Boris Johnson himself accepted this 2 weeks ago on LBC. We can make lots and lots of savings. Last year, TfL spent £383 million on consultants and agency staff. We can cut that by half. We can merge engineering functions from underground and surface. That will save more than £400 million. We can cut down on fare evasion. Last year cost us £61 million.
Don't you think Transport for London are trying to do that anyway?
Because we've had as the viewers said, we've had a part-time mayor not entering his next
job. He's not a ticket inspector. I mean, Transport for London is presumably.
If I could just make one correction.
Why don't we keep hold of the freehold in TfL, build these homes that we need, and have a revenue stream coming in? You know, Hong Kong's Transport Authority raises more money via clever use of its property than by fares. What we need is a full-time mayor committed to use the experience he has as a transport minister and making tough decisions with a successful business to make sure TfL works for Londoners.
If you disagree with Transport for London's figure of 1.9 billion as the cost...
It is their figure. Transport for London have taken the unprecedented step of correcting Sadiq Khan's figures, pointing out that they're up by about 400%. Tony Travers, who Sadiq Khan has just quoted, has said, yes, you could take £2 billion out of the budget, but it would be undesirable because it would freeze the expansion programme that London needs. What Sadiq Khan needs to do is explain which of the programmes he's going to cut. Is it the night tube? Is it the Freedom Pass? Is it the Circle Line upgrade, the District Line upgrade? You cannot take £2 billion out of the budget. Find me an independent expert who believes you can do what you're saying you're going to do without decimating the programme. And I think you need to be honest with voters. What are you going to cut? Which are the programmes?
There's a question. What are you going to cut?
Let me explain, and hopefully I'll get
You've talked about economies, you've talked about efficiencies. Transport for London are already looking for those.
You talked about the cable car, which would cost money to cancel. You talked about the Route Master bus, which would cost money to cancel, because the order's gone through. There's not a single plan you put forward
Let's hear what
that would
Sadiq's got to
reduce
say.
the expense of TfL. Not one example.
Well, it's desperate stuff from Zac. Let me explain how we can quite easily freeze the fares over 4 years. We can, for example, make sure we sweat the assets much, much more than we currently are. 40% of the contracts given to buses in London are given to companies owned by the governments of, guess where? France, Germany and Holland. So the fares we pay in these buses go to reduce the fares, guess where? France, Germany and Holland. Why isn't TfL bidding for these contracts? Why isn't TfL bidding for contracts in cities across the country? Why isn't TfL bidding for contracts around the world? We can increase the revenue streams of TfL if you've got a mayor with the experience and the vision. I'm afraid this is lazy stuff from Zac, desperate stuff. I've set out a fully funded fare package. TfL don't say you will pay exactly the same fares in 2020 as you pay now, not a penny more. That's the promise I'm making.
But if you disagree with the 1.9 billion which Transport for London
they don't say that.
That's exactly what they're saying.
They don't say that.
I've seen the figures.
I've spoken to TfL on a regular basis.
They've published the report saying that it would be 1.9 million.
So what will
it doesn't matter how many times you say it's not there, it's there in black and white. It's unprecedented.
It's for Londoners to choose between a mayor who's got the experience and the vision, or somebody who's been sloppy and lazy.
The choice is between someone who is capable of telling the truth and someone who's willing to mislead voters. And that's, I'm afraid, what we're seeing here today. This transport stuff we're hearing from Sadiq Khan is fantasy nonsense. It's Corbyn madness. It simply does not add up. And I will add that if you were to create the kinds of efficiencies that you're talking about in TfL, it would require you to take on the very people, the unions, that are backing and running and controlling your campaign. It just simply doesn't add up. And I think you need to front up with voters, or tell voters which of the great programmes that we're going to need over the next 10 years you're going to cut, because you can't have both. It's simply a simple case of mathematics.
You've explained your sums, but
let me give you an example of how we can invest in going forward. So Crossrail is an innovative project paid for by a combination of businesses, £4 billion, central government taxation and London taxpayers. Business contributes £4 billion. George Osborne needs to announce in his spring budget Crossrail 2 being given the green light. We need to start thinking about Crossrail 3. The time it's taken us to build Crossrail, in France has had 5 Crossrails. I've got the experience of somebody who was a Crossrail minister. We can invest in the future by keeping the fares down. The more desperate and rattled Zac gets, the more it shows how out of depth he is.
OK, there's one area I'd like to talk about, and it has nothing at all to do with policy, and that's the tone of this campaign. And by that I mean personal attacks on each other's character and background. For example, George Galloway last night.
Since the day and hour that Jeremy Corbyn was elected as leader, he has stabbed him in the back, in the front, in the side, and I, for one, ask everyone who supports Corbyn to vote for me first preference in the election for London Mayor.
I think it's only fair to ask you, is he Corbyn's man? You're not?
Well, either Zac's wrong or Galloway's wrong, because frankly I can't be both, on Zac's opinion, in the pocket of Jeremy Corbyn and in George Galloway's opinion a seller. I'm my own man. I want to be London's champion, London's fighter, London's advocate. I'm not in the pocket of the Prime Minister, the Chancellor, the previous Mayor or Jeremy Corbyn.
Is this going to be a dirty campaign? You've called Zac a serial underachiever.
I think it's really important that Londoners compare and contrast our respective CVs. What I think is not helpful is if you try and divide communities or we try and talk about background. I will never talk about Zac's background. What is relevant to talk about is what we've done since we've been adults, whether that's businesses we've run successfully, whether we've served in government, whether we've made tough decisions, whether we've made balance sheets balance. And I think those are really important for Londoners to know about.
OK, fine. He says he's not going to talk about your personal background, but he's just suggested you don't have the CV for it.
If you look at my record as an MP, it's very odd that Sadiq-khan doesn't seem to regard being an MP as a job. Maybe that's why he's managed to turn a safe Labour seat into a marginal. You look at my record as an MP where I took on a Lib Dem seat, a comfortable Lib Dem seat, and got the biggest swing of any MP in the country. The people who know me best, who saw me in action, knew that I was on their side. I was elected to take a stand against Heathrow expansion. I won that campaign. I was elected to protect funding for Kew Gardens. I protected funding for Kew Gardens. I got a string of successes that my constituents prized greatly, and as a consequence, people who'd never voted Conservative before voted Conservative for the first time.
It's winning Heathrow. It's not over yet.
I disagree with you. Heathrow is now being required to pass a pollution test, which you and I know it can never pass. We've kicked this issue off the agenda, and on a great many other issues as well. A giant thumbs up from the people who know me best. And if you judge politicians by their promises, you're always going to get let down. Because
people do judge politicians by what they say.
But that's a mistake. It's a mistake because politicians will promise the earth before an election, but you can judge a politician by their record. And my record, I invite everyone to scrutinise my record as an MP because I'm proud of it. I've held government to account and I've delivered.
You've called Sadiq divisive and radical.
I believe there is nothing more radical that has happened to politics in my lifetime than what's happened to the Labour Party. Sadiq Khan is an architect of that process. He nominated Corbyn. He was asked recently, do you regret it? He said, no, I'd do it again. It is a radical thing that's happened to our politics. It's a giant experiment with the Labour Party, which has wrecked the Labour Party, frankly, and I don't want to see that same experiment tried with...
You've got to let this one. It's noteworthy that 90% of this debate's been Zac talking about me. I want to talk about my visions for this city and the experiences that I've got. I think one of the things that's been really bad for our city is a top-down reorganisation of the national
health service.
I voted
Mayor of
against that. I think, for example, it's bad for Londoners that our students who want to go to university and have got the grades can't go because of the trebling of tuition fees. I worry about the hollowing out of London because of our housing and planning bill that Zac is supporting and I voted against. I worry about our city, and I think unless we have change on May the 5th with a mayor who's got the experience, the values and the vision to,
Sadiq,
to make improvements.
We sadly have run out of time. It's been great talking to both of you. I'm sure we're going to hear an awful lot of you from you over the next couple of weeks. But for the moment, to both my guests, Sadiq and Zac, thank you very much. I'll be back at the beginning of next month when I'll be talking to the man they're both hoping to replace, Boris Johnson. Until then, good night and thank you for watching.